in Lodi. I'm a farmer, a grape farmer, been one all my life until 2006 when the 5 children of Brad and mine together made the decision to build a winery and start a brand, of which they named LangeTwins. So 2006 I moved on to, as my twin brother would describe, the dark side of the business, and I moved into the winery and been with the winery ever since.
Well, thank you both for joining us. I can tell all of you that they are great ambassadors for Lodi and a wealth of knowledge on what has taken place here and how we all got here today. I know several of you have joined us previously on these things, so bear with me. We're going to provide a quick overview of Lodi to make sure you all understand where we're coming from. And then we'll get into the wines. We have 5 wines to taste through this evening. So quickly, the Lodi appellation, the Lodi wine region, is one of California's largest wine regions, just south of Sacramento and east of San Francisco. We have been farming grapes in this area going back to the 1850s. The first winery was established in 1858, just south of the city of Lodi. It has a long, proud tradition of growing grapes, going back many, many generations, as you'll learn this evening. One of the few of the distinctive characteristics that set Lodi apart, I think, is one, obviously, the climate. We're situated directly east of the San Francisco Bay. During the growing season, we get a very cool breezes that come through in the afternoon and create a very distinct climate for growing wine grapes here, unlike many other parts of the greater Central Valley. The soils, too, in the area are very diverse. We have some of the most diverse soil types spreading from the eastern side, just at the toes of the Sierra foothills, to the western side of the region, which the delta begins at. But I think the most important distinguishing feature that I've learned since I've been involved in this community is the people. And we've got a great sense of community here, and a great tradition of growing grapes and being farmers. It's unlike many other communities in California in that regard. We've got people that have grown up farming grapes. They've grown up farming. Their kids have been raised in the vineyards. I think Farrah can attest to that. Yep. And it really sets it apart, and there's a great sense of community with what we do here. I don't know if either of you would like to add anything on what you think is particularly distinctive about Lodi?
Well, I can do that. I'm the older guy in the group, actually, and Tim is the middle, and Farrah is certainly the youngest of the group. So, I mean, the reality of it is that it has been a region, like Tim said, for a long, long time, a wine-growing region. Mm-hmm. But most of the wines that you're seeing coming out of the Lodi at this point in time is all farm families. Mm-hmm. And so under farm families, we started growing grapes originally, and then eventually moved forward. And I've been calling Stuart Tim because that's his dad. And
Randy is the old one in the class.
Yeah. So to correct myself, Tim was one of Stuart's dad was one of the first growers in the region to start making wines out of Lodi vintages. And so Stuart's a part of really the pioneer winemaking families of Lodi outside of the very large entities that have been doing business in this region for a long time. So it really does show the multi-generational thing. And the last thing that I'll say on that is the new generation, and Farrah represents that new generation. It's exciting for old guys like me to look at the people who really are now running these businesses and their generational kids that are going to make a very big difference for this wine growing region in the future.
Yeah, and then also Lodi is a lot different than other regions. We actually have known each other for years, and we're all friends. We all get along and get together at events and have a great time together, and it's really neat that we all love each other's wines, and we all get along. So that's really neat about Lodi.
And I think one of the other things I just thought of that's really setting Lodi apart and putting us on the map these days is when my father first started making Lodi wines. Like Randy said, I think our first vintage was 1992. At that point, I think there was about 6 or 7 wineries actually in the area, and 5 of those were large industrial-sized wineries making California appellated wine. So Lodi wine, as an appellated and a branded product, really didn't start existing until the mid-90s, and it's really blossomed over the last decade. Here at the Winegrape Commission, I often tell people it's getting easier and easier with each passing vintage to tell the story of Lodi, because there's so many more wines coming out every year, and there's so many good and interesting wines of all the unusual varieties we grow here. We have over 60 varieties in commercial production, from Albarino to Vermentino to Zinfandel to Tempranillo to Mourvedre to all sorts of stuff. If it's being grown in California, it's likely being grown here in Lodi. So I think we will start moving on to the wines. I think it's easier to talk, and I know everybody is probably anxious to start tasting. I know I sure as heck am, because sitting here talking at a camera, you feel a little silly. So we're going to start with Randy's Zinfandel, and I'm going to let you, Randy, tell our guests about your vineyard and winery, and maybe a little bit about your family as well as you get into this, because I know multi-generation is really important to you guys.
Yeah, without a doubt. As I said in my introduction, that I am the 4th generation of Langes to be in Lodi region. My grandfather was born here in 1875, so I guess that does classify me as our family as one of the founding families of the Lodi region. Generations are important. It was at my dad's time, and then also with us, with our 5 children, between Brad, my twin brother, and myself. So it's an important continuum. I think not only for the Langes and the Lange family, but also for all these families that are represented in the wines here, is that these families think not in decades or even in 20-year periods of time. We think in 50 years, 60 years, 100 years. When we're making investments as farm families into building bricks and mortar wineries, which is the easy part, and then the hard part is developing that brand of wine, that label of wine that sits in front of you, and getting it introduced to people nationwide. You have to think in those terms. This is an investment not only in financial investment, but it's also a time investment. And so as an older person here getting started in the wine side of the business, I'm working for my grandchildren and their children, because my children are going to have to work really, really hard to get this established for their children. So the reality is we're thinking in multi-generations, and that's how we get started on that. The wines itself, the Centennial Zin, it is the only wine in the number of wines that we go to market with that is not an estate-grown wine. So this is a wine that comes from somebody else's vineyard. We purchased the grapes. But there's a great story behind it, and I want to share that with you. It is produced off of the Lewis Vineyard. And the reason why we're interested in this vineyard was for 2 reasons. One, it's 104 years old, and that is a pretty old vineyard. I guess it would classify as an old vine Zin. The other thing, though, is Charlie Lewis, who's the proprietor, the farmer right now, is in his 80s, and his father, George, was my grandfather's best friend. They did everything together, from fish together, to hunt together, to farm together. I have pictures of my dad when he was 3 or 4 years old standing in Lake Tahoe, of all places, with Charlie. So I mean, the reality is it's been a long time association with the Lewis family, and so when we started our vineyard, we went to Charlie and said, it's time to reconnect the Langes and the Lewis family, and we want to do that with your Zinfandel. And hence, this is a very special wine to us. It's coming from that 104-year-old vineyard. This 2009 vintage is the 99th vintage, so 2010 is already in bottle, aging in bottle. And so and that's the 100th vintage coming off of that vineyard. And that's why, for us, it's a special wine. It spends a bit of time as stainless steel fermented, and then it spends a bit of time, like almost 2 years in barrel, new oak as well as previous used oak barrels. We also use American oak and a touch of French oak as well in that aging process. Once we've accomplished what we wanted to do in that barrel aging process, then it is then bottled, and it's bottled, and then it's aged in the bottle for a period of time. This is our most recent vintage, is the 2009. Very small production. I think on the bottle itself it says 198 cases or 178 cases of wine produced. And in this vintage, the following year is a bit more, but it's certainly going to have very limited production because the vineyard itself is 6 acres in size, and the crop size always resides around 2 to 3 tons to the acre, which is really ideal for this vineyard. I'm not one to speak too much about, low tonnages equal high quality. I look at the balance of the vine, and if there's a vine structure there that can handle a larger crop, we will certainly do that. But on the other hand, this is an old vineyard. It's very old, gnarly, ancient type vines. So the appropriate vineyard load on a per vine basis would equal about 2 to 3 tons to the acre, and that's indeed what it normally puts out in that level of production.
Thank you, Randy. One of the questions popped up there was, what do we think white grapes are suited for Lodi? That Lodi is known for their reds, but what sort of success are you seeing with white grapes in Lodi?
There's lots of, as Stuart indicated, there are a lot of different varieties grown in here. From Sauvignon Blanc, we do a Muscat clone Sauvignon Blanc that is doing very well on market, and I enjoy it. It's the lady I'm married to's go-to wine every night. So basically, she's not afraid to pour the wine in a tumbler and put a couple of ice cubes in it. And don't you be afraid to do that as well. So the Sauvignon Blanc, the good standby of Chardonnay, and the different and Lodi is very distinctive in the different regions. We have the foothills to the east of us and the flatlands here, and they both produce distinctive varietals. And so we will, in our Chardonnay, we'll do a little blending of Chardonnay out of the foothills with Chardonnay in the flat. And so to come up with a specific taste profile that we're interested in. So there's Viognier, there's Albarino, there's a number of wines. I think that we would fit the taste profile of a number of people. I tell people that, when we are at shows and we have 8, 10 Lodi wineries in a row, and I said, if you're starting here, if you don't find a wine here that you like, keep going down, because if you get to the end of the row and after you've tasted 10 different wineries, if you don't find a wine that you like, you're not a wine drinker. And that's what I say, and I firmly believe that.
So Julia wants to know why you don't have Old Vines Inn on the label, Randy.
That's a good question, and so for whatever reasons, I think it should be there. I think, and it will end up being there. But we are a 9-member family, and if you live within 9 members who all have distinct opinions and are very vocal about those opinions, sometimes you have to compromise. I will win this battle, though.
Having spent a great deal of time with many of the rest of his family, I can tell you they all have strong opinions on things.
Yes.
Good. Well, I think it's a very, very lovely Zin we're tasting this evening, and I think it's showcasing something else that's going on in Lodi. For many, Lodi is seen of as making just a fruit-driven, almost fruit bomb style of red wines, and I think what we're seeing is the region is maturing on the winemaking side, and you're seeing a wide range of styles from lighter Zins to more full-bodied Zins to everything in between. I think on the whites, I think Lodi is a hidden treasure for whites, and I think we're going to see more and more progress being made with these in the years to come as the growers and vintners really dial in their vineyards and their winemaking styles and produce very refreshing, lively wines that I think appeal to a wide audience. Oftentimes they're from obscure varieties, so the marketing of it is a little bit challenging, but we're dead set on continuing down those paths and making it work. So.
Stuart, I will say this though, and Farrah can attest to this because I know she spends a lot of time in market as well. I know that you do too. Is when I go into market, I talk about Lodi as much as I talk about LangeTwins. And I think the reason for that is that we growers here are used to working together and sharing information. And I think we all, and the wineries all firmly feel that a rising tide raises all boats, and the more we get people tasting Lodi wines, regardless of whose they're tasting, we are going to gather the necessary inertia to keep this ball rolling to the point where my grandchildren will go into market and people will know that where Lodi is located instead of saying we're south of Sacramento.
Yep, I would agree. I think we all lead with our Lodi story and then start talking about our families and wine second. It's a very, and it is a very neat community. I was, I wasn't born here, but we set up our winery here, and it has been one of the most helpful communities to get going, whether it's, you need to borrow somebody's forklift or tractor or whatever it is, somebody will always come to your help, and they're not asking for anything in return. Except when they have a problem, then they'll come and ask you.
Exactly.
But it works well, the barter system is alive and well in Lodi. So I think we'll move on to our second wine, unless anyone has any other thoughts they want to add on the LangeTwins Centennial Zin. But I thought it was a very delicious wine to get us started this evening. So the next one we're going to move into is the Harney Lane Lizzie James Old Vine Zinfandel 2011. And Harney Lane's story is similar to many of the stories you will find here in Lodi, in that they are a long-time farming family. I think they first got established in the area in 1907. And I believe this vineyard was actually planted in 1907, and they still have their house and their winery on the original farm that Georgia Lerner's great-great-grandparents settled on. The family, Harney Lane, the winery is actually located on Harney Lane, and that's where it gets its name from, but it's the Mettler family originally, and it's Kyle. Georgia was a Mettler, and now she's married to Kyle Lerner, so Georgia and Kyle Lerner are running the winery along with Georgia's mom, Kathy. Georgia's father, who really pushed them to get into the wine business too, passed away last year, unfortunately, but he was an inspiration for them too. But they've done a fabulous job. I think they first started out in 2006, and this is and started making wines. They built a beautiful tasting room, a small production facility. They've got Chad Joseph, one of our local winemakers, working with them and crafting some delicious wines. They make an Albarino, a Chardonnay. They do the Old Vine Zin here. They do Tempranillo. A few other things I think as well too, and they've won countless awards out of the gate, and they're making some great wines here too. One of the things I want to highlight, why I just noticed it while I'm sitting here looking at the back of the bottle, though, is, and Randy would be a good person to talk about this too, is this is a Lodi Rules certified green wine as well, and I believe theirs was too, and the Saint Amant Zin is as well, and I think the Mettler family Vineyard Cabernet at the end will be as well too. For those unfamiliar with our Certified Green Sustainability Program, it's a third-party certification program that certifies about 103 vineyard practices regarding sustainability. Ranges, well, you know what, Randy, let me let you tell a little bit about it.
It's been an ongoing project, really. It's an effort that the growers of Lodi have been leading the charge for 20-some years, probably longer than that. Time flies. But indeed, it is a program that really covers the A to Z of farming. And that means more than just crop protection. That means soil, the soil protection, the water that you use in the vineyard practices, the wages that you pay for the people who work with you in these vineyards. So it covers everything, even to the percentage of biodiesel that you burn in your tractors and what you do with your leftover oil. So I mean, and you're assessed, and they come in prior to harvest, and they will audit your records to see that you've attained that. It's divided into chapters, and if you fail a single chapter, you fail the certification. So, and you get to do it every single year. You have to pass the certification. So it's an important program, but I think the most important thing to say about this sustainable program, and it goes back to what we've been talking about here, is, you know, sustainable farming, the word sustainable has many definitions. I define sustainable as generational. You cannot be generational without being sustainable, and I think that's key to what we're doing here. We are actually leading the charge in sustainable or generational farm growing or farming, and we're very, very proud of it. And indeed, all the LangeTwins wines are certified, and there's very few wines that come out of Lodi that carries the Lodi appellation that do not, that come from farm families that are not certified.
Just for a little facts and figures, I think in 2013 we had close to 26,000 acres that were certified across California, of which 21,000 were certified right here in Lodi. There's a few families and vineyards outside of Lodi that are certifying to our program as well, too. One of you guys asked, you know, where is Lizzie James Vineyard and what's the production? Lizzie James Vineyard is located just on, I believe it's on Alpine Road, between Victor Road and Kettleman Lane, if I'm not mistaken.
My realty. Yeah, right next to us.
Right next to their house. So
the wineries are pretty close here.
And I think they made around 450 cases of this wine too. So it is pretty small production, and this is a 2011 vintage wine. 2010 and 2011 were very light years with Zinfandel. I know some of the old vineyards, you know, hardly threw out a ton to 2 ton to the acre. You balance that with 2012 and 2013, where we had very robust Zinfandel crops, so we're able to fill our tanks back up with Zinfandel, but it was pretty lean for a couple years there on the Zins. They made great, intense, concentrated wines, as I think you'll see in this wine we're tasting right now. But it's quite a delicious wine. I just got a little distracted by one of our tweets on the board here, so one of our late joiners. We welcome wine harlots there. I wasn't quite sure what that was all about, but it got me definitely distracted. So the Harney Lane, they've done a fabulous job of making their wines, and their Zin is, I think, one of their standout wines they do. I know it sells out quickly every year. I believe this wine was aged for about 22 months in French oak, a combination of new and neutral oak. It's a fairly robust wine. The alcohol, I think, is listed at 15.9, but I think it carries its weight very well. Welcome any of your guys' thoughts on the wine. I know a few of you expressed already, but it's tasting great this evening too. And I think you know, we're going into the holiday seasons, and I'll ask you know each of you what's going to be on your holiday table of Thanksgiving. Farrah, you want to fire it out there?
Sure. So at our holiday table, it seems like there's just endless wine. So we have all of our different wines, but then of course the turkey, the ham. But we like to pair, which we don't have on the table here today, but we have the rosé. Our rosé is more like our white wine, of course. Right now, we'll come out with an Albarino next year. But Rosé is probably going to be the one that's being drank the most because it goes well with the turkey, the ham, and everything else on the table. But all rest of the wines will be there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Zinfandel goes well with Thanksgiving, without a shadow of doubt. But I always like starting my meals off with a white wine, and so I will choose some of these local wines that, like the Albariños that are here, that are produced out of here. But the Sauvignon Blancs and Chardonnays will start off, or rosé, which is really the dry rosés that come out of the Lodi region are quite spectacular. So I enjoy that. But then we get into the bulk of the meal. Then the red wines come out. There are some very nice Pinot Noirs that are produced out of the region. But I would be concentrating probably at Thanksgiving on Zinfandel. But we have a large family, and so we have a lot of fun because when we open up a bottle, it's never a single bottle.
Yep.
We'll have 4 or 5 glasses on the table, and if we're going to drink Zinfandel as the main course wines, there'll be 4 or 5 Zins on the table at the same time so we can taste them all. And then it really precedes that, or follows that, is a vigorous discussion who likes what and with what. And so it's usually that type of holiday celebration that we enjoy doing.
Yeah.
They've obviously got some great families that get along, but I always like to remind people that more wine is consumed on Thanksgiving than any other day of the year, and often I think it's to tolerate some of the visiting relatives. But my family is very similar. We just throw out all kinds of wine. I mean, there's so much flavor and food on the table that the wine is there to help facilitate conversation. We'll oftentimes pull out a few old bottles. I'll oftentimes bring weird wines from all over the world and blind taste the rest of the family on it to see if they can pick out where they're from. I think it's a great day because it's fortunately, and for the most part, still one of the few days where the rest of the world shuts down. And it gives you time actually to sit around and actually enjoy yourselves with family and wine. One of the questions that came through here was regarding the diurnal variation help balance these rich, ripe, high alcohol wines. I don't know if you want to touch on that, Randy?
High alcohol wines?
No, well, the diurnal swing in temperature, our cool evenings, and how do you think that affects the vineyards and the ripeness of the grapes?
Generally speaking, Lodi does have that really large swing of temperatures between daytime temperatures and nighttime temperatures. So whether it's a Zinfandel or a Cabernet, a Chardonnay, or a Sauvignon Blanc, they all benefit from this exchange of heat and coolness. So for us, and especially here in this region where we don't get a lot of rain, so we're able to really take advantage of the heat and the coolness, plus watching the weather and irrigating at the right time has a huge effect on the quality of wine that comes out of the region. It takes farming, though, and it takes diligence. I firmly believe that all these wines, the growers are in their vineyards and they're paying attention to what's happening. But the swing in temperatures are a great thing. I mean, really, I have a good friend that lives in Modesto, which is 30 miles south of here, and I love calling him about 9:30 at night when it was 100 degrees at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll call him up at 9 or 9:30 at night, and I said, we've been sitting out on the patio for the last 20 minutes. I had to go back in and get a sweatshirt to put on because it was getting a bit too cool. How's the temperature down there? And the reality is they maybe lose 4 to 5 degrees when we lose 25 to 30 degrees. And so it really has that big effect of the Carquinez Straits to the west of us, the Sierras to the east of us, and that air movement that crosses this region has dynamic effect on wine quality.
Drilling down a little more on the temperature, one of them's asking what's the largest swing this past season, and I don't have my weather reports in front of me to recall, but
I don't think you're going to see, at least this is just a farmer talking and with farmer bones, but I mean the reality is it was a cool season. And so when you have the type of cool season that we had throughout the year, you're not going to see these gigantic fluctuations. We really didn't have any really high peaks or spikes of temperature, which makes farming a lot easier, for sure. But regardless, even with spiked temperatures, if you're paying attention, you can weather those type of high temperatures very, very well. So I don't think you're going to find a great fluctuation. I mean, you're going to see 25, 30-degree temperatures, but there have been times when we've had 35 and 40 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, my 2 cents on it is I think one of the things that really distinguishes Lodi is it a more moderate climate than many would imagine.
Yeah.
And we don't see the daytime highs like many of the other regions do. And I know just to the east in the foothills, you'll get hotter days and colder nights. Whereas here, we'll get the cool nights, but the cool afternoons don't get near as hot. And I think what that does in the wines is it creates a very kind of pure fruit-driven wines, and I think that's one of the hallmarks of Lodi wines and vineyards is the really the fruitiness that comes through them, and I think a lot of that is just the moderate climate we get. I often like to tell people that the area was famous for its flame tokais many years ago, which were a seeded table grape that was shipped all over the country. It was only in Lodi that it developed its distinctive flame color. And you'd go north and it wouldn't get that color. You'd go south and it wouldn't get color. And that was the climate that was right here, right around the city of Lodi, that gave it its distinctive flavor profile. And you see that in the wines today in a different way, though.
So how many tokais are left in the district?
I think there's still a couple hundred tons of grapes out there that are tokais, but most of those vineyards are planted very close to the city, and I think they're holding out for the housing market to return, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So.
but I think it deserves a comment, because when I started farming professionally, I farmed all my life because I was slave labor for my dad. But that being said, when I started farming in '72, in those times, the first Cabernets were being planted in 1972, 73, 74. The first Chardonnays, the first Sauvignon Blancs were being planted. We were about 35 to 40,000 acres in total, and probably well over half of that was flame tokay. 20 years later, you fast forward, we probably had, in that time, 75, 80,000 acres, and there was more Cabernet in the district and more Chardonnay in the district than any other variety. Today, we're well over 100,000 acres in the district, and what would be a legacy grape, the flame tokay, hardly exists. And that is, again, another example of the generational investment that farm families here in Lodi are recognizing the need to stay in front of the market and farm grapes, farm wines that are going to meet the taste profile of our consumer. And so I think that's what is very distinctive about Lodi.
So we'll move on to our third wine this evening, which is my wine. It's the St. Amant Marion's Vineyard Old Vine Zinfandel. And Randy mentioned that he was slave labor, and my father always told me and others that I was protecting my inheritance as I worked for free for many years. And I used to try and tell people I was trying to augment my inheritance, at least by helping grow the business. But I think one of the keys to the wine business and being a farming family is lots of friends and or family that are willing to work for cheap, because there is no shortage of things to do. And nowadays with us and our wineries, and places to go pour your wine and people to talk to, and so good friends and family that work for cheap is essential. But so the wine we're tasting right now is the St. Amant Marion's Inn, and I think it embodies many things about family. First, St. Amant is my mother's maiden name, which my dad always thought sounded much better on a bottle of wine than Spencer did, and it does. And Marion's Vineyard is actually the grower's mother's name. So I often tell people this is one mother of a zin, or the mother of all zins. And the Fry, we buy these grapes actually from Moore Fry Ranch, and we have a great collaboration going back to when we first came to Lodi. In the mid-'90s, our own vineyards were dying of phylloxera, and so when you're a winery and your vineyard dies, you kind of got a problem. And so we were fortunate enough to connect with Jerry and Bruce Fry, and they basically just brought us 7 tons of grapes and said, don't worry about paying us, we'll figure it out later. My dad was a nervous wreck over the whole bit, and ultimately we bottled it up. It tasted really good, and we sold it. And that was 17 years ago. We've been doing our More Fry Ranch Old Vines in. Back in 1999, my dad went to Jerry and said, Jerry, we need to make the best in we can from Lodi to help put Lodi on the map. He said, what's your best vineyard? And we'll do everything we can in the winery to make the best wine. And Jerry said, well, I've got this one little 8-acre block over here that was planted in 1901. Own-rooted zins that are being sold off to other wineries, and so we started with that in '99. It was a big success, and now I think we take the whole 8 acres, and it's been a huge success for us every year. We use it in the single vineyard wine like you've got here in front of you, as well as some of it gets blended into our larger More Fry Ranch Zinfandel as well. This is a 2012 Old Vines Zin. We bottled it in August, actually, and honestly, we haven't released it yet. We're releasing it next month, so you're one of the first to get to taste this wine. It obviously still needs a little time in bottle, but no better time than the present to start selling the wine and generating some interest in it. So. The Fry family also, I think, when we talk about generations in farming, they actually have been farming in California going back to 1855, and I called up Bruce today to get the story, and he said his great-great-great-great-grandfather was on a whaling ship and arrived in San Francisco, and the crew all abandoned ship, and most of them went to the hills looking for gold, but his family settled in the Hayward area of Mount Eden and started farming crops there. They got squished out by the cities and moved to Lodi in the early 60s and bought this ranch and have been farming wine grapes in the area ever since then. And I think they are a great family to work with. We have a great relationship. It's a handshake deal. There's no written contracts, and they do everything they can to help us, and we do everything we can to help them. So the wine itself, 2012, like I was saying earlier, was a more abundant year. And this is one of the amazing things about these old vineyards. I mean, this vineyard produced about 4 tons to the acre in 2012, which you think a vineyard that's 111 years old and it can still produce 4 tons to the acre, and it's pretty remarkable. And I think that's one of the reasons the vineyard is still in the ground today. If it wasn't producing for 100 years, it would not be in the ground today. As we're finishing up our zins, and I think Farrah's has a little zin in it too, and they do some great zins too. I think that is the other real charm of the region, is we do have more acres of old vine zins than any other part of California, and we really actually don't know how many acres we have, but my guess is it's probably in a couple thousand. Some very large blocks planted in the early 1900s, pre-Prohibition, to some very small blocks here and there all about the district. And fortunately, these wines and these vineyards have caught the interest of winemakers not only here in Lodi but across California, and the prices come up, and I think you're going to see them stay in the ground for years to come.
So how did we keep all these vineyards, Zinfandel vineyards, in the ground through Prohibition when the vast majority of the region lost the vineyards? I know that our family, the only thing that survived Prohibition in our vineyards was Zinfandel. I have the answer. I don't know if it's the answer, but I think that it certainly had a part of it, was that during Prohibition it was certainly legal to produce 200 gallons of wine per family every single year. And so families that decided to make a living shipping crop or Zinfandel from Lodi, like the Mondavi family, and Cesar Mondavi came to Lodi specifically to ship Zinfandel, put it in a box, 36-pound box, put it in an ice car, rail car, ship it to New York and Boston, and sell it to the immigrant families on the East Coast who bought the grapes, made their 200 gallons. I doubt a very few of them stuck to 200 gallons, but and that's what kept a lot of Zinfandel in the ground here in the Lodi region, because during Prohibition it was shipped as fresh fruit.
That's how they kept ours going.
So there was a question about what you'd pair with this, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I've got a friend who's a wine chef in Philadelphia, and we get together every year for ZAP's annual Good Eats and Zin, or now it's called Epicuria, and he prides himself in pushing the envelope on things. And when we first paired with him, he created a chocolate salad to go with this wine. And when you say chocolate salad, people are going, "What the heck are you talking about?" And it really does work. And the unfortunate thing is he keeps it a top secret. You know, it's basically mixed greens with dried cranberries and gorgonzola cheese, and then he has this salad dressing he puts together with espresso beans, white chocolate, and rice wine vinegar, and a few other things, and it creates this amazing pairing of this big, robust old vine Zin and a salad. So
I got to try that.
it is. It's pretty interesting. You'll have to come to the ZAP event this year. I think you're usually there, though, Randy.
Yeah,
so.
I am. I just missed out on that.
Yeah, you're usually too busy working. It's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah. Well, next time you're not going to get off the hook.
So that's the hard thing at some of these events. You know, it's hard for us to enjoy ourselves. And many people say, this doesn't sound like work. You get to go to all these fancy dinners and eat all this food and drink all this wine, but it's not always as fun as it sounds. But
you have to scramble before the event starts to go around.
Schlepping a lot of cases of wine, but we do it for many different reasons. And back to the family tradition. My father's family had been growing and farming in California going back over 100 years as well. My dad grew up on a dairy, wanted to get as far away from a dairy farm as he can. And if anyone's ever milked a cow twice a day, they know why. But he went away to join the Army, and when he got out, he was having an inkling to get back into farming, and bought a piece of property. He didn't know a thing about wine or grapes. Suggested to grow grapes. He planted grapes, and one thing led to another, and 30, 40 some years later, we're here still making wine and growing grapes, and we wouldn't do it any different.
Absolutely.
So I think we've got two more wines to cover, so we need to get moving on. And so, Farrah, I'm going to turn it over to you, because we've got your wine,
our cab blend,
Klinker Bricks and Mortar.
Bricks and Mortar. So a little bit about my family. I'm actually 6th generation grape grower in our family. Been farming grapes since the late 1800s, early 1900s. Started off with Zinfandels and Tokais, and then worked our way into other varietals over the years. But our main focus is Zinfandels, but we came out with a cab blend 2 years ago. But a little more history about us. Actually, Klinker Brick, the name, we get a lot of questions about that. We have 3 family homes made out of Klinker bricks, which were the overfired bricks from the 1920s, 1930s that got burnt at the bottom of the kiln before kilns were electric. And they were discarded and tossed, and they would make a clinking sound when they were thrown on a pile. And that's how they became clinkers. And so my family decided to bring over all the bricks from San Francisco and build their custom homes in the 30s. And I actually live in my great-grandparents' house on our Syrah vineyard, and my parents live on the next road over in one of the other homes. So we keep the family homes going, and that's how we got our name. Ties in the family, but is a little different story. But it's been a great name for us, and haven't stopped yet. So we actually started in 2000. So our first vintage was Klinker Brick Old Vine Zinfandel. Started in 2000, but we've been making wine since 1996. We were selling on the bulk market for about 4 years before we put it into the bottle. But my dad actually was the one that made the jump from grape growing to growing and having the winery. But when he married my mom, he took over the farming for my mom's dad. So the 6th generation is on my mom's side. And my great-grandma was actually a Mettler, so you're tasting Harney Lane, which is Mettler's, and Mettler Family Vineyards, which you're having next, is another Mettler. So there's a few Mettler families that actually have wineries.
Which goes to show you that you never want to talk about old Lodi families, because the reality is they're all related.
We're all related.
They're all related.
But yeah, and you know, Lodi's a small town, and word travels fast around town. But so that's a little bit about my family. And so now the bricks and mortar, we had a lot of people actually wanting, because we're known for our old vine zins and some big reds. They wanted something a little different. They kept asking us for a blend. So that's when we decided to make this blend, and it's actually 60% Cab, 30% Petite Syrah, and 10% Old Vine Zinfandel. And all of our vineyards are actually located in the Mokelumne River appellation, the sub-appellation of Lodi, with the sandy loam soils, and these 3 wine varietals come from there as well. But yeah, our vineyards range from about, our youngest vineyard we have is about 15, and then we actually go up to 117-year-old vineyards, and that includes all of our varietals that we grow. But a lot of them are on their own rootstock, a lot of them are dry farmed, which they don't receive any irrigation but the water that is received by the rain, and it's just a really neat area.
You know, I'd like to comment on dry farming, because when the old families that came into Lodi in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s, they settled in Lodi because they could do a lot of specialized farming, like beans and things of that nature, watermelons. That's what our family started off with in the 1880s, is farming watermelons. And the reason they did that and settled in this region, because the water table was sitting between 4 and 5 feet. So basically, you could, if you're ambitious, you could dig a hole and get to water. Which really led to a lot of dry farming, watermelon dry farming and bean dry farming. There was no irrigation going on. So as the years went along, these old vineyards that were planted in the late 1870s, 1900s, they followed the root system, followed the water down as it receded. Today, it's quite a different thing, because water table now resides, depending on the year, between at least in my location, which is north of Lodi, between 55 and 65 feet below the ground surface. So it's changed dramatically, and so it's more difficult. So when Farrah talks about dry farm Zinfandel, or any type of vineyard dry farm, that's a very unique thing at this day and age, and so something that is very special.
Yep.
So there's a question, Farrah, on does the blend change each year?
No, it does not. It's always going to be 60% Cab, 30% Petite Syrah, 10% Old Vine. And that was my dad's choice for the Old Vine Zin. He had to throw it in because we are, he says, a big Zin producer, so he has to have the Zinfandel in it.
It's his signature.
Signature. And then there was a question about have you found Lodi wines easily in your states?
So our readers, our guests this evening are from Virginia, California, Wisconsin, and Oregon. And are you guys' wines available in those markets at all?
Wisconsin, not Oregon, and not Virginia. So basically California, Wisconsin for LangeTwins.
Mm-hmm.
And we are actually in all 4. So you can find Klinker Brick in 4.
And I know my family's wines, we're in Virginia, California, with distribution, and we're always happy to ship anywhere in the country that we legally can. And I think the Harney Lane wines are pretty much exclusive winery, direct to consumer, and in and around California. I don't think they're in too many other states yet, but they've had so much success just selling out of their tasting room. The Mettler family, I think, are a little more widely distributed, but I'm not quite certain on those states.
Yeah.
But it's one of our goals here is getting the Lodi wines out there, and I can attest that Klinker Brick has definitely been one of the leaders in that regard in getting out into the market and presenting their wines and helping build the name for Lodi, and it's helped pave the way for many of us else here.
That's true, because we're in 15 states, and every time we've gone into a new state, we always find Klinker Brick there before us. So, so it's fun. It's really great when you walk into a state that we're not in and you go into a fine wine shop and you find a Lodi wine like Klinker Brick sitting on the shelf. It really means a lot to us.
Yeah. And that's what we love too, is, you know, we love seeing the other wineries coming up and helping us in the market and getting Lodi on the map. And it's great that we have this group that actually travels together as LOCA to a lot of events across the country. And next one I think is Boston. Everybody's going to go to Boston. So it's really neat. It's great that we're getting Lodi out there.
So we have one more wine this evening, and we're getting down to the end of it here. I think we have about 9-10 minutes left. So I'm going to start pouring our final wine of the evening, which is the Mettler Family Vineyards 2010 Cabernet Sauvignon. And I'll pass it along to my guests here. The Mettler family is another Mettler. They have been farming in Lodi, I know, for quite some time as well, and I think the generation now is probably the 5th or 6th generation as well. The kids, which I'll call the kids, Kelly and her brother Adam and sister Kim, you know, I think encouraged their parents to start a winery, and they did, and much like Randy on the end. Yep. And they...
and Steve Felten in the middle.
And they've done a fabulous job. They first started out just making wines at other places and getting out, and they started with a Cabernet Sauvignon, which was a little bit unusual for Lodi at the time, because most of us were doing Zinfandels, and I think they did their first Cabernet. I think it was 1999, and there was a few other Lodi Cabernets being done, but they've done a fabulous job with it, and they consistently produce year in and year out a very nice wine. Their vineyards are also in the Lodi Rules program and farmed sustainably, and they're also, I think this vineyard is also organically farmed and certified as well too. So they're one of the few growers in Lodi that actually are involved in the organic certification as well. But they make a very nice cab. I think they also do a Petit Syrah they've done for a number of years, and a Zinfandel, and they just, within the last month, I believe, opened up their new tasting room, which is a gorgeous spot, and they're making some other more unusual small production wines. I think they have a Pinotage that they are doing too, which I tasted the other day and tastes very nice as well. This is the Mettler Cab, so enjoy it this evening.
You know, Cabernet has been a long-term varietal in the district. A lot of people don't realize that. I think some of the first Cabernet was planted in the Lodi region in the early 70s. I know my first Cabernet that we planted in the Lodi region was 1978. I think there are a number of things that really made it possible to grow Cabernet in the district. One of them, it certainly was the use of drip irrigation. When I was slave labor for my dad, it was furrow ditches every other row with main ditches in between, and the water went down that ditch row. And so there wasn't a lot of control of the water. You took the water to the end of the ditch, you held it for a period of time. Some vines got a lot of water, some vines did not. And then if you had a levee break or a ditch break, then there was a whole patch of grapes that got too much water. So there wasn't a lot of control about how to keep that water evenly distributed over the vineyard. With the technology of drip irrigation that was really starting to be embraced in the Lodi regions in the early 70s, and today I highly doubt that there's too many vineyards that are not drip irrigated in the Lodi region. And the reason for that is that you can spoon feed water. And so we measure in the vineyards through a number of different ways and means the soil water content. And we can also monitor, because we measure every foot, and so we can monitor it through the growing season what the vine is using and how fast it's using it. And then we turn on those drip systems and we spoon feed the water at what we feel is the right time to give that vine the water that it needs to survive. We found through years of experimenting that the best thing to do to a Cabernet, like this Cabernet right here, is to starve it for water up to veraison. So there was a period of time when we went into deficit, and that would mean the vines started to lose their tendrils on the vines themselves, the leaves started to turn, and so you were really trying to just crunch that vine prior to veraison. And then right after veraison, we got through veraison or the coloring, and then we would irrigate. And we found that had a profound effect on the quality of Cabernet coming out. So by the middle 80s, there were a lot of people coming to Lodi buying Cabernet wine and blending it in with other regions' Cabernet because of the advancement of good quality here. And as it was said earlier, that we're known for fruit. We grow fruit here in Lodi. This is what we sell here is fruit, and we're wine growers selling the fruit that we grow. And so fruit-forward wines, and so we've been growing Cabernet here for a long time, and I think that would surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think what many don't know, too, is Lodi is California's leading producer of Cabernet in terms of volume. We produce more Cabernet here than Napa does and Sonoma. And combined. And it goes into many California wines that, at a $10 price point that don't say it, but a lot of it comes from here. A lot of it comes from Randy and some of our other growers. And I think Cabernet is actually another one I think that Lodi has a bright future with too. I think it could make some very delicious wines.
Try the Tempranillos of Lodi. Another wine that's there's not a lot of it growing here, but what is growing here, and Bokish would be one of the families that grow Tempranillo here. I think it would be, give us some time, we'll figure it out, but it's going to be a really future varietal coming up.
So our friend from Virginia is asking, so grow, not make, and I think, that kind of speaks to a couple of things. One, I think Randy and we still think like farmers and growers as opposed to wineries, and so we often say we grow things even when we make wine from them too.
Yes.
And he produces a Cabernet Sauvignon under his label.
Yes.
And obviously Farrah is putting one together too. So I think
it's an interesting thing that occurred in the 70s. In the 80s, we had early 80s, we had major wineries come in here. We've all heard one in particular based in Modesto, California, and so we were really a no-name district, and we were just everything was sucked into large programs that were California appellated, and so the responsibility of the farmer ended at the scale of the winery. So you delivered your grapes, it was weighed. When it went into the winery, it disappeared in gigantic tanks in the back, and you lost identity to it. Well, along came Bob Mondavi and other leading wineries that came into Lodi, and guess what the Mondavis did is they kept you separate. So you crossed that scale, and then they put your crop in an individual tank, and then you were judged by your crop, not at that time, but in April and May of the following year, when you've got to sit down as a grower with their winemakers and taste your wines, and not only taste your wines, but taste them against the other growers of the community. That really created a group of growers that said, oh, your Cabernet was really, really good. What did you do in the vineyard? And what it really did was, when we were in the 70s, we were wine grape growers. And by the middle 80s and late 80s, we were wine growers. And there is a distinct difference between wine grape growers and wine growers. And so when I talk about, and I am a farmer, and when I talk about that, I say that I am a wine grower. It starts in the vineyard.
Yeah, and I think, most of us that are involved in the business recognize that, the wine is made in the vineyard.
Yep.
And that's where it's going to happen. As winemakers, we're just stewards of the vineyards, and, your best success is going to come from the efforts you put into the vineyard.
Yep.
And I think all 5 wines we've tasted tonight are very distinctly Lodi. You have 5 different wines that show different styles of wines, different varieties, but, a few years ago, these wines didn't even exist, and so I think that's one of the really exciting things which happening here in Lodi today is you have wines like this that are coming out with each vintage, and consumers are getting engaged and buy them and enjoying them and telling their friends about them, and it's moving forward. So I think we're about out of time, and all these quotes about food flying on the board are making me hungry because we haven't had dinner here, and so I'm thinking I need to go get some food. But if there's any last questions, you're free to contact us afterwards. By all means, any of us are always accessible and happy to answer any questions. And then here at the Winegrape Commission, we're more than happy to answer any questions or show you around. If you ever come to Lodi, by all means.
Let us know.
You're always welcome here, so come and see us. And I want to thank you this evening for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the wines. And we'll bid adieu and have a good Thanksgiving dinner, and hopefully have some Lodi wine on your table.
And we'll see you in Lodi.
I want to thank Farrah and Randy for joining us this evening, too. They didn't know quite what they were getting into, especially Randy down there. But I think he helped a lot. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Bye.